government. With that, I'm going to yield 5 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from the District of Columbia, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
I thank my friend for yielding, and I strongly oppose this undemocratic, paternalistic bill. This Congress, Republicans have introduced 22 bills to overturn District of Columbia election laws. Yet Republicans have refused to make the one and only change to D.C. election laws that D.C. residents have requested, which is to be giving voting representation in the House and Senate. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from the D.C. Council, Chairman Phil Mendelson, and D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab opposing H.R. 192.
Without objection.
Before I discuss the substance of H.R. 192, I want to discuss democracy and the lack of it in D.C. The nearly 700,000 district residents have no voting representation in Congress, and Congress has the ultimate say, even on local D.C. matters. My Republican colleagues are correct that Congress has the constitutional authority to legislate on local D.C. matters, but they are wrong that Congress has a constitutional duty to do so. Instead, legislating on local D.C. matters is a choice. In Federalist 43, James Madison said of the residents of the future D.C., and here I'm quoting, "A municipal legislature for local purposes derived from their own suffrages will, of course, be allowed them," end quote. The Supreme Court held in 1953 that, quote, "there is no constitutional barrier to the delegation by Congress to the District of Columbia to full legislative power," end quote. D.C.'s local legislature, the council, has 13 members. The members are elected by D.C. residents. If D.C. residents do not like what the members vote, they can vote them out of office. That is called democracy. Congress has 535 members. The members are elected by residents of their states. None are elected by D.C. residents. If D.C. residents do not like how the members vote on local D.C. matters, they cannot vote them out of office. That is the antithesis of democracy. The merits of H.R. 192 should be irrelevant, since there is never justification for Congress legislating on local D.C. matters. However, I will discuss H.R. 192. H.R.'s Local Resident Voting Rights Amendment of 2022 allows D.C. residents who are non-citizens to vote only in local D.C. elections. D.C.'s law is not unique. More than a dozen cities today allow non-citizens to vote in local elections. While the Local Resident Voting Rights Amendment Act applies only to local D.C. elections, there is a long history in the United States, including before its founding, of allowing non-citizens to vote in local, state, local, and federal elections. At various points, 40 states have allowed non-citizens to vote, including Texas, the home of the sponsor of H.R. 192. Congress only first prohibited non-citizens from voting in federal elections in 1996. The House passed a disapproval resolution on the Local Resident Voting Rights Amendment Act in February 2023. The Senate did not vote on the disapproval resolution, and the Local Resident Voting Rights Amendment Act became law in March 2023. Voting, including non-citizens, started earlier this month in D.C. primary elections. Why did Republicans wait to bring H.R. 192 to the floor until voting had already started? They did so to disrupt the elections. The Revolutionary War was fought to give consent to the governed and to end taxation without representation. Yet D.C. residents cannot consent to any action taken by Congress, and they pay full federal taxes without being denied voting representation in Congress. Indeed, D.C. pays more federal taxes per capita than any state and more total federal taxes than 20 states. If House Republicans cared about elections or D.C. residents, they would bring to the floor the D.C. statehood bill, H.R. 51, the Washington, D.C. Admissions Act, which would give D.C.
But I grant the gentlelady another 20 seconds.
Would give D.C. residents voting representation in Congress and full local self-government. Congress has the constitutional authority to admit the state of Washington, D.C. It simply lacks the will. D.C. residents, a majority of whom are black and brown, are worthy and capable of self-government. I urge members to vote no on H.R. 192.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized. Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Louisiana.